And we're live. Well, good morning, ladies, gentlemen, hobbits, extraterrestrials, and cryptids, to a new episode of Scuttlebutt with the Phill. Today we'll be covering the animated TV show Avatar: The Last Airbender and its spin-off, The Legend of Korra. Uh, now, I don't have I wasn't quite young enough to really get into them when they came out at the time, but as I got older, I guess curiosity grew, and then my fiance, I did, and I don't regret it. It's actually pretty good. Um, it was kind of a surprise. I didn't exactly expect it to do much, but I thought it was pretty good. Um, we'll get into some of the little world building details and other aspects of the world that's built within the Avatar universe. But yeah, generally speaking, I think um, typical like fantasy stories are usually done with a Western sort of medieval style. I don't know if that's just the kind of fantasy that we're kind of accustomed to in the West, but I mean, if you don't have to look very far to see that sort of medieval look in most Western fantasy. You have um, stories like Lord of the Rings, which definitely takes a little bit from that. You have Chronicles of Narnia that takes a little bit from it. Even elements of Harry Potter sort of borrow from that. Um, yeah, generally speaking, it's not unheard of for there to have that kind of inspiration. And not to say that's wrong or anything. I mean, it has definitely turned into its own beast, and it's going to be difficult to ever get rid of it. Not that we have to get rid of it or anything, but um, the one thing I can say is that the Avatar universe sort of adds a layer of not only diversity but also just variety that we otherwise wouldn't have had. Um, since we usually don't get fantasy stories that are outside of that sort of aesthetic look, and excuse me, and beyond that, I think we usually expect our fantasies to look that way, and yeah, I'm glad that this one doesn't. Um, it takes on more of a Eastern Asian style, and it's sort of a mixture of different elements from, I would say, China, Japan, and a few of the other Southeast Asian um, aesthetics. And yeah, I think that's a very powerful element of this universe, especially since it's implied that just among the several nations that are on Earth or this version of Earth at the time, there's no other civilizations aside from this sort of you know bender non-bender sort of dynamic, and in that in itself is a little interesting, especially when you go back to the later seasons and you kind of go into the deeper spiritual sort of metaphysical elements of the show that I find kind of interesting for this kind of a universe. But yeah, beyond that, I'd love to hear what people think of the show, and if people are interested in watching the live action renditions. In this episode, we will not be discussing the Avatar or the Last Airbender movie that was directed by M. Night Shyamalan. I've never seen it, and according to everyone I've talked to, including my fiance, they tell me not to watch it. Not that I was ever interested in watching it. I do like M. Night Shyamalan as a director. At least I love his early work, all the way up from The Sixth Sense to the as far up as the Lady in the Water movie, and then there's kind of a gap. Then I pick him up again when the movie Split comes up, and he's been doing fairly decently since then, I think. So I won't fault him for that. But um, yeah, I don't know when or if I'll ever watch the live action movie. But if I ever do, I'm sure I'll cover it in some capacity. But we will not be covering the live action TV show that recently came out on Netflix, strictly because I have not seen it as well. But I have not heard anywhere near as bad reviews as I heard for the live action movie. So I likely won't mind checking it out when the time comes, but I just have not checked out yet. So yes, my fiance and I we watched it on Paramount Plus, both the Avatar show and Legend of Korra, and between the two of them, I definitely found myself by the end of it preferring the Legend of Korra more, and I'll get into why I preferred Korra more. But I felt like Avatar definitely set up the world and established all the elements very effectively. Um, yeah, I don't feel like um, the world of Avatar was ever inconsistent. I always felt like it was sort of we were being revealed things slowly, and it was kind of like peeling back onion layers. And so that's usually the best move whenever you're creating some story. You want to create something that at least feels lived in and like people could exist in it. And so when you do something like that and you peel back layers and it just starts feeling more and more consistent, then you've done something really good with the design of the world and the characters. And one of the things that I believe in writing is that when you create a story, and oftentimes it can depend on how it actually comes to you, but in general, I think when I get an idea or a premise, I usually decide from that, okay, what are we going to do about you know building on this premise? And so from there, I build on the world, and then from that point on, I design the characters. And I think once I design the characters, um, we're basically almost to a point where we can start now designing the story. So it's sort of I would say a three-pronged approach. You attack the premise, then you go to the design of the world, and then you do the characters. And then at that point, you're ready to hop in and dive into the actual nitty gritty of the story building elements. Because ultimately, at that point, you're answering the question of who is involved, what the story is about, and then the when and the where can kind of come out of the world building itself. And then as you dive into the story itself, you can answer the why. So you're basically doing the classic 5W approach. Who, what, when, where, why, and then from there you have a good foundation on your piece, and then would come once it's all written, you have another series of things you got to do, and take yourself through editing, revision, working your way through publication. But that's the same with I think any story. I think that's applicable to film, television, books, graphic novels, comic books. The whole creative experience, I think, will follow the same exact kind of route, and so that's important to remember for your writers out there, but and other creatives. So, getting back to the main thrust of the series, so the world of Avatar is set in a world where there are these benders, and the elements play a significant role. Earth, water, air, and fire. So you have these elements that set this series apart from anything else. Because I don't think I've ever seen you know this sort of like I would go so far as to call it superhero adjacent sort of uh, element, given the fact that uh, the benders can sort of use their powers to, you know, exert a force upon the world. So in that way, it's sort of a mix of like being a Jedi or Sith and being able to use the Force. Even though in this case it's the bending, and I think that that's always been sort of an interesting element of this universe. But what I would like to do at some point, if we had more people involved, we could do a poll and kind of fill it out and see who would prefer to be in what part of what kingdom. So who'd want to be in the Earth Kingdom, who'd be in the northern or southern water tribes, or other people who'd want to be a part of the Fire Nation. So we could do something like that, but maybe later. But beyond that, um, the general premise, and I don't think it needs too much introduction, but you have this young kid who's frozen for like 100 years, and he wakes up in the middle of a conflict. He's woken up by these siblings, and you know he's kind of thrust into this new situation, this new paradigm, and he has to kind of navigate that, even though he is working off of mostly 100-year-old information, and that can be ripe for some comedic moments. Also, pretty solid for exploring the coming of age elements that come with having a younger protagonist, and seeing him grow through the journey, and then leading up to the very very end of the series, and setting up the threads that carry on into the Legend of Korra. And so I think that um, as a franchise, I think it's pretty well rendered in that way too. I never felt like the show had too many filler episodes. I think everything kind of felt like it was like it needed to be there, and I feel like when you're writing something like this, you need to keep that in mind. You obviously don't want to write something that feels like it's sort of circling the wagons. You want to make something that at least feels like it's contributing to something a lot bigger, at least in the terms of the epic storytelling that you would do with something like this. So, in that way, I thought it was very effective. And yeah, because I feel like one of the things that sets the show apart in certain ways is that um, you have as a part of your main team, you have a couple of animal companions, because you have Appa, the air bison, and then you have the he's like a lemming, or is he like I forget what they actually call him, but his name's escaping me. Oh no! Yeah, you have the two animal companions, and one of these days I'm going to buy a plushie for both for my fiance. I think that would be cute. But anyway, beyond that, um, you have Aang, Katara, Sokka, and eventually you have Toph. And so you have our little core team, and you have them go out into this, you know, sort of broken world that's slowly but surely being swallowed up by the Fire Nation. And then you have, you know, Zuko and his uncle, who are, trying to find their way, through life as well. And his uncle's sort of guiding him, and his uncle's pretty affable, pretty personable, and so you like him, even though most of the other people you meet in the Fire Nation are kind of jerks. So including Zuko's father and sister, and his sister is, I think, I'd argue, the ultimate villain of the whole thing. I think that's interesting to kind of see play out in the whole um, grand scheme of the series. And one of the things I did notice as I was watching was that there was an emphasis on creating a series that wasn't afraid to kind of push the boundaries on who can be a villain. And so I thought that was an interesting element. I mean, because even Zuko has like a physical abnormality, because he has like a burn scar on his face that he got from his father or conflict with his father. And then you have, you know, his sister and her little band of people that follow her that are all women, and they're all portrayed, you know, in varying ways as being on, team villain. And, you know, I don't know if it's woke or anything to create villains that are empathetic but also females, because I feel like there's a tinge of people who seem to think that making certain minority groups women or certain minority groups villains is kind of playing on sort of cultural expectations of portraying certain people a certain way. And I don't agree. I think by making villains as diverse as your heroes, you're kind of saying that people are people and that they can do pretty much anything. And I think that that is actually a pretty empowering concept. So um, I'm really glad that Avatar was able to pull that off. And we get into the good stuff about Legend of Korra, which kind of inverts some elements that Avatar established. So I always think that's an interesting sort of issue explored in the piece. But beyond that, I would also love to know anyone's favorite season of the show. The thing that I do like to kind of explore in some of these reviews and retrospectives is, you know, various elements of, who's our favorite character, who's our favorite setting, our favorite, episode within the season. But yeah, I don't know if I've ever done something like that. But I think when the time comes and the audience on this channel builds, we'll definitely be doing more of that kind of fan polling, especially in the chat. So definitely stick around for that. I recommend, you know, commenting, liking, and subscribing. All of it helps push us up in the algorithm. We're a small channel, but we got big dreams, and we're gonna do everything we can to achieve them. So by hook and by crook, we'll get there. It's gonna be a long road, but I'm dedicated to the effort. So anyway, because if you dive into the deeper, larger lore of the Avatar universe, you're going into discussions of spirits that eventually get released upon the world. This is well after Aang's era, and we're going into the Korra era. But beyond that, you have a world feels that it feels lived in, feels like there is thousands of years of history going on here, and you're kind of being a witness to the recent part of it. And I think that's an element that sets this apart from sort of the westernized uh, European style, medieval style fantasies that we're kind of very accustomed to these days. But one of the things I do want to talk about with Avatar is that it was completely unforeseen. I think, watching through the first season, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. Um, Felt like by the end of that season, I was more interested in seeing where the thing could like expand. And then when we got to season two, I feel like I was able to attach myself to it more. And I think by the end, by the next couple of seasons, I was pretty much, quite on board with what had gone on. And I felt like it was a great character arc to have Zuko and Aang eventually, team up, become partners, and become, leaders in this new world that they'd be building together. And it's that kind of element that I think is the strongest point by the end. And I think you know I agree with many of the fans of Avatar that the best character arc is really Zuko's, because he's going from being sort of this villain to being this, dare I say, hero. And I think it's a strong arc. I mean, not to apply Star Wars to anything, but like I already had, but we'll do it again. There's essentially this element in his arc that kind of reminds me of what we've recently seen in the Star Wars sequel films with Kylo Ren. Arguably, both arcs in both series are the best um, aspects of both series. Just because I feel like both of them feel well made. I mean, the difference is that Star Wars' arc is kind of isolated within that series, while the Zuko arc is a lot more well rendered, and it kind of belongs. It fits pretty well within the entire scope of the Avatar series. So, um, with that, I think that um, Avatar gets elevated beyond just a simple like children's animated television show, and I think that's why you're seeing so many people want to adapt it in live action. And yeah, I kind of feel like the only way to adapt it properly would be to, and again, like I said, I've not seen the live action TV show or film. I feel like the best way to adapt something like this would be to adapt it on a larger canvas through, not an animated means, but you know, sort of an higher end animated film, but like close to realistic sort of animation. I feel like that could set it apart. I know there's talk that they're going to do like a film and on top of everything else. So um, I'm curious to see how that's going to work. I think if I'm told correctly, it's going to be a continuation. So yeah, I'm very curious to see how that's going to go down. But I'm down for anything. This series kind of took me by surprise. I mean, I'm sure if I would have watched it when I was younger, um, at the time, I'm sure it'll probably would have had a lot more time to sit with me, and I probably would have been able to appreciate the series a lot more. But yeah, I think that element, the whole thing is just unparalleled, and I think it took me by surprise, and I think that I do regret not seeing it as a kid. But beyond even that, I think one of the funniest elements that I learned from the show is that the actor, the voice actor who voices uh, Zuko, is Dante Brasco, and he is known for playing was it Rufio from the 1990s Hook. And I learned, about 15 years ago when I was in high school that he actually attended my high school that I attended in Paramount, California. So I thought that was interesting. I've never met him. I know some people who know him, but uh, the thought had crossed my mind to invite him on the podcast. But yeah, I have no way to kind of reach out to him. So if the channel gets big enough, I do plan to cover Avatar again. I'm planning on buying a Avatar because I know they have an Avatar RPG game, like a tabletop RPG game, and I think that could be fun to play. And I think I'd love to invite some people on to give it a whirl. So yeah, I'm hoping I can get more and more uh, friends of mine involved, and we can kind of play it out. The last few years, I've been buying up a ton of tabletop RPGs, and haven't played any of them. But most of the time, I'm using them to kind of peruse the core rule books, mostly because I feel like those can be very helpful in designing world building and character elements and stuff of that nature. So in that way, I think it's pretty informative and helpful. So I'm probably going to still keep doing that. But um, yeah, one of the things I do want to cover before we move on to our next segment. But before we do that, we'll be doing a little bit of a break. we're doing ad time. So ad time. The Scuttlebutt with the Phill show is brought to you by Vega Aerospace. Vega Aerospace. In space. No one can hear you. All right, now back to our show. So anyway, we'll be moving on to a discussion of the Legend of Korra. So the Legend of Korra is set like 75 years after the conclusion of Avatar: Last Airbender, and in this series, we're moving from following Aang, the Avatar for that era, and then we're moving into Korra, the Avatar for this new era. And one of the things I do notice about this new era that we find ourselves in is that now there's a city, Republic City, that's kind of the focal point of much of the storytelling, and it's kind of built on like some of the places we'd seen in the Avatar show, and this is kind of a product of a vision of Aang's and Zuko's to kind of create a world that was kind of safe for benders and non-benders alike. And I think that um, this sort of like early 20th century look to everything is kind of fascinating to me. And I feel like maybe that's probably why I like this show a little bit more, because you're starting to see more of the things resemble stuff that is more modern than what we'd seen before. So it would imply that in this alternate world where the bender aspect is the most prominent, that you have this world that's progressing technologically. It's not stagnant. So if Avatar was set in like the I don't know, late 19th century, like the 1870s, 1880s, and this one's like set in like the 1930s, 1940s. So at least that's the impression I kind of get from it. And the thing that set Korra apart from the regular Avatar shows, obviously, that Korra is a female, and we're being led by a teenage. Um, I think she's like 15, 16 when we pick it up in the beginning, and teenage female protagonist, and she's sort of like Aang in some ways, in that she's kind of abrasive, kind of like socially awkward in certain areas, but you know, I think she's an endearing character. I think she's actually a pretty good character, and all the people that she hangs out with through the course of the series provide her arc a lot of interesting elements. And I think one of the things I did notice that by the end of the series was that you ended up in a situation where um, there was sort of a tinge of like romantic elements between her and who would become her best friend, um, which I think is an interesting way to take it. But it would also imply that there's a larger element at work in the series. But um, yeah, when they release the spirits, when they the villains in this story, because there was no single overarching villain in either show really, but I feel like there was more like season long running villains through the entire thing, and I feel like that set it apart from you know the regular Avatar show, in that a lot of the villains in Korra were you know present for a very specific reason, or one reason or another. And I feel like that added a stronger element to the proceedings, because you ended up with villains that had strong motivations, were driven, and were constantly going up against Korra in various ways. And yeah, I mean, I prefer Korra just strictly because of the kind of weird sort of diesel punk elements, because you have like these like mecha uh, like soldier robot things that appear toward the end, and then because it's all these products of future industries, and then the other billionaire guy. It's kind of like more of an eccentric uh, Ted Turner, Howard Hughes type, and then you know I don't know, a lot of these elements were very well formatted to me because Republic City is sort of a mix of New York City, San Francisco, and I think a few other like I think maybe Tokyo as well. And even some of the aesthetics are kind of you know keeping with the Asian style aesthetic that is established in Avatar, the first series. So I think all of this taken together, creates a world that feels fundamentally distinct from anything else I'd ever seen before. And I think it's partially, a reason why I tend to gravitate toward it instead of just the main show. And I would love to see them actually render The Legend of Korra in live action eventually. I'm definitely hoping whenever I get a chance to watch the Avatar Last Airbender live action TV show that I'm able to get kind of a feel for um, where they might go later. Because I do feel like, at least from some of the rumors I've been hearing, that that show is good enough. So I'm not hearing anything anywhere close to as bad as the M. Night Shyamalan movie. So I find that to be heartening, and I hope that keeps up. But yeah, time will tell on that one. But yeah, I think I would love to hear what are some other people's favorite elements of either show, Avatar or The Legend of Korra. And I would even love to hear what are people's thoughts about where they could go from here. Um, I don't think the world of Avatar is done. I feel like there's way more room to explore. You know, maybe not. You know, returning back to the Aang era or even the Korra era. I mean, where does the world evolve to? Maybe there could be like a Batman Beyond sort of. We do a story 75 to 100 years after Korra, and it's more modern and more technologically advanced, and maybe you know benders are more proliferated in society, or maybe they're less proliferated. I think there's a lot that can be done with it, and I think that you know I would love to see that, and I'm sure many others would. I love the kind of Hayao Miyazaki style anime. I mean, I've never really been an anime person or fan of that style as much. I mean, I do like, as I mentioned, that, but I also like the Planetes manga and anime series, and I feel like that's kind of like my gold standard of anime. Not that I haven't seen too much, but I feel like that kind of strikes a balance between realism and uh, the anime element, and I feel like I would prefer to see more anime that does that. I mean, I've been to Anime Expo. Um, I went back in 2014, yeah, 2014, 2015, and today that's my only experience with Anime Expo. I don't think it's my scene. I don't know if I'd ever go back. I think I would have to be invited to go back, and I'm not opposed to creating an anime of any type either. I think I would kind of relish the idea of making something that is an anime style Phill. I don't know if I'd ever do a TV show one, but I'd try to never say never. And there's been a handful of them I've seen over the years that kind of predate this. I mean, there's one I really love, uh, called the Royal Space Force, the Wings of the Hanamis, and I do recommend people check that out. It's very rare to find. It's not a very common DVD, but I do recommend that people check it out. But give me one moment, please. Sorry about that. So, ostensibly, the series that I think, in terms of anime, that I mean, even though I do say I love the Plantis series, I think there's been some anime that I've seen after the fact that I think works really well. I mean, there's a was it? I think it's called AVI or something like that. Style television show that's kind of a rendition of the Starship Troopers series or books by Robert A. Heinlein, and I think that that series is pretty interesting to explore and see. And there's other elements of Star Blazers, the space battleship Yamato that one day I do want to check out. And I even want to check out some of the stuff by was it BattleTech or is it Robot Tech? I think those are kind of interesting, and I hope to explore those at some point too on this channel. Um, it's not that I want to explore obscure lore elements, but I do want to kind of branch out to series I find that don't get a lot of love or underappreciated. I want to do something different. We'll get into kind of the state of the channel later today, but yeah, in general, um, you know, I'm a big fan of The Legend of Korra, big fan of Avatar. I'm really looking forward to hopping back into the show with the live action series. I've heard that they've casted someone to play Toph, so that's interesting, and I think bodes well for the series moving forward. So, for that series moving forward, so lots of good things I think on the horizon for Avatar, and I hope that you guys stick around for us to explore all that when the time comes. I would love to do some kind of a deeper exploration of the lore and the character elements, rather than just a sort of like basic primer. So, um, yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that it isn't the last we've seen of Aang, Korra, and any other future avatars. But beyond that, we're going to kind of wrap up right now. I have to take a tiny break, but we're going to be diving into our next episode because we're doing a three hour. It's not going to be full hours, but they're going to be 3 hours of different subject matter. We'll be exploring. We already explored a little bit of the Avatar: Last Airbender series, and then we'll be diving into the Dragon Riders of Pern at 10 o'clock, and then at 11 we'll be going over a semi-brief exploration of the state of the channel and where we go from here and where we plan to end up in 2025 and beyond. So I hope you tune into that, and I hope that your days are going well. I hope that everything that you wish comes true. So beyond that, we'll be closing out this episode and moving on to our next episode in a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, and explore the world of the Dragon Riders of Pern, one of my favorite series of novels. So goes back as far as my love of Dune. But anyway, I hope you guys take it easy or join me in the next stream, which will be in about 5 or 10 minutes. So anyway, it's important to remember to, grab your towel and don't panic. And remember, of course, so long and thanks for all the fish. We'll be seeing you back here in 5 to 10 minutes. So be there or be exceptionally, I don't know what the term would be, but certainly not a four-cornered object.